My talk is going to discuss peace building and reconstruction in Israel. Thank you. In Israel, Palestine, Bosnia, South Africa, Northern Ireland, Spain, with a focus, as was mentioned, on how urban governance and urban policy can contribute to conflict management. And I think at first what I want to do is just show you some of the slides, give you a sense of what I've seen and where I've been. Okay, can you see all these words? All these words mean peace. And they all mean peace in all sorts of different languages that are written in very small print on the bottom. Next slide. These are my two main questions that I have here. Urban management and what it can do for intergroup identity conflict. And I study these areas where there's nationalistic conflict, where groups have their own identity and they are fighting and doing terrible things to each other in pursuit of their nationalistic goals. My second main issue and question is urban management, urban policy amidst political transitions. And this we can refer to as democratization, or any sort of transition where we're moving from one political regime to another. I am not a full advocate of democratization, but democratization is one of these political transitions that I look at, and what the role of urbanization is. Next. This is as fancy as I get with PowerPoint. Very nice, isn't it? And this took me a while. The cities I've studied, there are 8 of them, and I break them into 2 bunches here because the first set I studied back in 1994, 1995. Jerusalem, Belfast, Johannesburg, and that was during the transition out of apartheid, and Nicosia, Cyprus. And then the second group I studied more recently in 2003, 2004. Barcelona, looking at the transition they had from the Franco regime in the 1970s, but also looking at the nationalistic conflict there between Catalan and Spanish nationalists. The Basque Country, which many of you are going to be familiar with because political violence is still a fact of life in the Basque Country. And then Sarajevo and Mostar, 2 cities in Bosnia Herzegovina, one of the countries created out of the destroyed former Yugoslavia. Next. And again, you can just keep clicking. I propose to you that urban conflict and cities can be put on a continuum. On the far left, cities that are in active conflict. And then we move to the right, a situation where cities and societies, there's suspended violence, but that's about all that's happening. It's like an alcoholic who has stopped drinking but has done nothing to deal with the root issues that's causing the drinking. So violence has stopped, but that's it. It's a dry drunk, if you will. And you can keep clicking because the cities will pop up below. As we go to the right, you see some movement and advancement toward peace. And on the far right, something we would call stability or normalization. The cities I've studied, I put Jerusalem on the far left with active conflict. Then 2 situations, Nicosia and Mostar, which are just stuck. Violence has been suspended or exhausted, but they're in a state of concussion, if you will. They really have not moved forward, both the cities and the societies within which the cities exist. Belfast, I have some movement toward peace, and of course I can explain all of this, maybe during questions. And Sarajevo, some movement toward peace, basically because the war was so terrifying and the war is now over, that there is some gradual incremental movement toward some peace situation. And you can click one more, you'll get one more city. I also put the Basque Country moving toward peace, very normalized urbanization in a way, very strong and innovative city management, but at the same time political violence, still dictating some of the vocabulary. And then on the right, one clear case of stability is Barcelona. The other case you might ask, why is that? What is that doing on the far right of stability and normalization, that being Johannesburg, South Africa? And this brings up a very difficult point about this. Johannesburg, South Africa has rampant criminality, has rampant levels of crime. And yet, it has addressed the root issues of that conflict, of apartheid. And now we have a majoritarian democratic regime in South Africa. And what this shows is the extreme concussion and trauma that exists from decades of state oppression. And the signing of a peace agreement and the institution of a new regime is one thing, but there's generations of people that have been oppressed and subordinated in those decades, and there's almost a backlash now from many black Africans because of the massive amount of economic inequalities and disparities in South Africa. So what this means is Johannesburg, in a way, if you go back to the alcoholic parallel, Johannesburg, in a way, is a recovering alcoholic. Johannesburg is in 12-step sessions. They are dealing with the root issues that cause them such pain. And that's black subordination, black disempowerment. All of that has been addressed, but it also shows that once you get to a degree of peace, it's going to hurt like hell still. Because there's legacies and there's years and decades of this oppression which still has this effect and will have this effect over decades, even with peace at hand. Peace is not only hard, but it hurts. Next. Now, very quickly, some visuals. This is the only visual I'm going to show you that I did not take myself. This is the Israeli wall, the separation wall that is being built today and has been built for the last 2-3 years, separating the West Bank from Israel proper, and for Jerusalem causing huge damaging unilateral effects on the Jerusalem urban landscape, because it is not only separating the two sides by a wall, but the Israeli government using the wall as a way to further de facto annex land into Israel proper. Very difficult and long-term consequences from the building of a wall that separates one side from the other. When one builds a wall, the only thing one learns about the other side on the other part of the wall are stereotypes. There's no fresh water coming into the reservoir anymore, and the stereotypes build, and the animosity builds, and the stories of hatred build when a wall separates two sides. Next. This is also a wall. This is Nicosia, Cyprus, which has been walled off. It's been our only walled, divided city since Berlin. Since Berlin is no longer divided, this is the only one we have now in the world, with the exception of now Jerusalem emerging. But Nicosia has been walled and divided into two since 1974. And the United Nations is there as a buffer to keep the two sides, the Turkish and the Greek Cypriots, away from each other. Next. This is Mostar, Bosnia Herzegovina. In Bosnia, the three sides, and excuse my very simple labels here, but you have Serbs, Croats, and Bosniak Muslims. And in this city, the most dastardly fighting was actually between the Croats and the Bosniak Muslims. And these two sides really destroyed massive amounts of this city in the Herzegovina part of the Bosnian state. And today, both sides exist. They're roughly in parity in terms of demography. So both the Muslims and the Croats, roughly about 50%, and they're living in a destroyed city. So how does one reconstitute such a city like this? This is one of the most difficult cases, because not only is it de facto divided, but it's destroyed physically.